Let me start going ahead. I previously presented a very similar webinar in a longer time frame for PMI in North America. So I will, Ali, after that, we can make the slides in PDF format available for participants. So slides that we go over quickly, and they're going to be able to see the content after that if you like. So I'm going to go ahead. This is the structure of what we're going to do here. Talk about what integration is, because apparently nobody does really talk about integration. On one hand, we can say that integration is the essence of project management, but on the other hand, it's very hard to really pinpoint and describe what's really involved in project integration management. So I'll focus on planning, on, of course, stakeholder and communication, which this is really the way that we bring it all together. Talking about managing time, this is not the time management knowledge area. This is really manage our time. And as project managers, we got to be able to do that effectively and, of course, mentor others. Otherwise, it's all going to get lost in waste. Talk about risk and assumptions. They're related and, of course, part of putting it all together. And then learn how to really reduce the number of false alarms and say no. So all these things are going to be wrapped up with some lessons learned, and it's quite ambitious for 40 minutes. Feel free to put together whatever questions or inquiries you have, and then we're going to spend the last 15, 20 minutes trying to address those. So let's go ahead. We know what the definition of the project integration management is by the PMI, right? It's about putting together right activities that define, identify, combine, unify, and coordinate all the processes and all the things that we are doing together at the project. But the thing is that integration is not linear and it's not tangible. What do I mean by that? Integration is out there, and if we don't really know what we have to do, it's not going to get done, or at the very least, it's not going to get done properly. So within the Pembroke Guide, right, the processes are presented as discrete components, right, with, of course, different levels of rigor and focus that are required, but there's no really single way to capture what we need to do in project integration, right? But we all established, you can establish that project integration is critical for success, right? We must coordinate all the other knowledge areas and all the other things that we are doing in order to make sure that we follow what has to be done, right? Follow the life cycle, include everything, right? That's risk, that's assumptions, that's understanding constraints, defining success, right? Many project managers have trouble looking at the big picture. And even if we manage to, it's quite common that project managers get sucked into the vortex of events quite shortly after the project begins, and this is where we get stuck. This is where we get stuck and start chasing reactively after the event instead of actually leading what we have to do. So, these are integration considerations, right? I mean, anything that you see there, I mean, we all know these things, and this is one of the biggest problems. We know what integration is about, right? It's about change control, it's about understanding the state, the methodology, the culture, but putting it all together is where it's getting difficult, and this is what I'm trying to do here. So, what does it mean? We start with buy-in, right? Getting buy-in is how do I generate support? This is going back to stakeholder analysis, understand really what my stakeholders want and need from me and from the project, and then deliver it to them, or at least deliver them something that is valuable to them. And create a plan of attack. Most project managers don't have a plan of attack. I have a plan of attack. I help project managers and organizations define how we're going to actually attack the problem. Is it bulletproof? No. No. Is it fireproof? No. But at least we have a plan. It's robust enough, but on the other hand, flexible enough. Realize possible trade-offs. So defining the success criteria and saying, okay, I know scope, time, and cost are the most important things, but at the same time, which one can give when, because it's not that I can guarantee delivery of both scope, time, cost, and quality throughout all the project, the entire project. Learn from previous events, right? Both from bad and from good things. If we do not learn from good things, we are not going to be able to recapture some of them. understand the drivers of the project, the success criteria we said, manage change control, very important. I mean, really take risk and change out of your project, and it gets simple, right? So manage the change because it produces risk, it produces uncertainty. Seriously manage risk, not just say that you manage risk, not just do a little bit of an exercise just in order to pay a lip service and then put it on a SharePoint. Quality. Understand what quality means and then measure how much it costs us to achieve it. Quality costs money, we know that. I mean, philosophically it doesn't, because whatever we put into it will be paid off later, but it does cost money, and we must be able to understand how much we are spending on it. Surprisingly, many organizations spend too much money on quality. They just don't spend it in the right places. They spend it in too many red tape and inspections and approvals rather than actually proactively upfront on prevention activity. Collaboration, and it's very surprising how many organizations I've seen around the world that people don't collaborate. They say they do, but they don't really collaborate. Have a BA that helps them. Efficiency in time management, we said. Communication, we said. And establishing ground rules is very effective. Change management, again, in the context of stakeholder management. And then those things at the beginning of the project that we don't pay enough attention to. Put together a real chart, a couple of pages only, right? Perform a kickoff meeting, but a meaningful one. And then try to measure how prepared the organization, how ready the organization is for what we are undertaking. So the reality of project management, I put alligators there because unfortunately many times project managers and their colleagues behave toward each other like alligators do, right? I mean, we just grab and grab, I need, and we don't actually help each other. we don't define things properly, so people tell me that they need stuff soon and fast and using adjectives rather than actually tell me when they need stuff. I use the term the Turkish proverb because there's something that I like to call an old Turkish proverb that says that the fish smells from its head. So lack of leadership and lack of control. I'm not talking about project control. I'm talking about control over the events by the project manager usually reflects on the entire project, and look after the sponsor too. I said the vortex where we put out fires instead of actually being proactive because it consumes our time. And a little bit more team building, a little bit more questions to your colleagues. How can I help you? How can we work better together? Because we don't do those things enough. And of course, we live in an era of instant gratification. That is, I need a success yesterday and I don't want to spend any time and money on it. And we know that it's not possible. By putting things together properly, I'm going to be able to articulate what it is that I can deliver and set the expectations straight. So, not a perfect world, right? I'm a Victoria Krulam from Latin is planning, right? I mean, it's about planning. Victory likes planning. It's impossible to make project management perfect, but there are many ways that we can actually improve our position towards delivering success, right? And again, as we established, it's quite well-known concept. So here, for example, take a look at this slide. It's a little bit inspired by the Agile Manifesto, that it's not that they don't value the things on the left, but they value more the things on the right. So scope, time, and cost, of course, are the measures of success, and I'm going to be evaluated against it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that change control is in place, that quality and cost of quality are managed properly, that risks, I have control over how much rigor and how much focus I put on it, right? Not overly, but do the right thing. Communication, I'm big on communications and setting up expectations and ground rules, and then charter and responsibility assignment metrics, defining who does what, because many times we just assign tasks to teams or to resources that don't really exist. They are theoretical resources, and then when the task has to get done, it doesn't. What I try to do in the book, actually, excuse me, is trying to articulate that success can be defined in different ways, right? We don't necessarily need to use the PMI triangle, right, of scope, time, cost, and then whatever competing demands, risk, resources, and quality. I like to use a balloon, right, and actually try to illustrate to my stakeholders that it's like a balloon. And balloon, like the laws of physics, when you press on one side, something's got to happen somewhere. And sometimes some stakeholders don't get it, right? They say, okay, give me more scope, give me more functionality. And I say, okay, I need something. They say, well, we don't have more time, we don't have more money. I said, okay, something's got to give. The problem with the balloon is that if the balloon starts bulging, it's still okay. So bulging, it means that you press on one side and unfortunately the other side doesn't give, so another part can give. So you say, okay, don't give me more time, possibly give me more money so I can acquire more resources, right? Because if you don't do things, the side of the risk is going to start ballooning, it's going to start bulging, and eventually the hot air will come out of quality. So when it blows up, this is where quality goes. So what I try to do, I perform this quick on the left side of the screen, on the top left, quick paired analysis and say, okay, let's take scope, time, cost, and quality, which are the measures of success, and try to measure which one is really more important right now for this part of the project, right? And again, I mean, I'm not implying that quality can be compromised. I'm just saying that sometimes we got to define what are the standards that we are pursuing and what are the standards that we're not pursuing. But at the end of the day, it's not that an avalanche, right? Why does it say avalanche here? Because it's not that big things happen just out of nowhere. Things shape up in certain ways, one step at a time, in baby steps. And if we don't do these things, if we don't get the stakeholders to understand the stakes and what it takes to achieve success, success is not going to be achieved. Then what's quality, right? I mean, I put here a couple of letters on the screen, right? Do the combination DTR, TFT, do the right thing right the first time. This captures the essence of quality, right? Do the right thing. This is quality assurance. Do it right. This is quality control. And the first time, this is the planning. Unfortunately, I know personally several organizations that they prefer to do the right thing right the third time, right? Or the second time. It's not a matter of prefer, it's a matter of their reality, it's a matter of their attitude toward quality. Instead of actually put the money, the time, the effort up front, they wait, deliberately or not, for the second or for the third time. I'm talking about prevention, the cost of quality, and then we have the Pokayoki, right? This is error proofing from Japanese. This is how we build mechanisms inside the process in order to make sure that quality is achieved. So, first of all, desired of cost of quality versus actual cost of quality, what we can see here on the slide trying to illustrate is that on the left, we have the actual cost of quality. So, unfortunately, we don't spend enough on prevention. We end up auditing and approving more, and then, of course, more failure. And it ends up to be up to probably 20% of the cost of the product, while how it should be is that we spend the bulk of it in prevention and then some of it in appraisal and then a little bit of failure, but the chunk is much smaller. It's 3 to 5%, and we got to realize, where is the money going? Is the money going for planning and design, or rather the money is going for audit checks, approvals, gates, sign-offs, and failure? So Pokayoki was invented, if you like, or articulated by Shigeru Shingo in 1960s, right, talking about error proofing. It's a method to prevent defects. So essentially we build a process, or we build a product in such ways that it forces the user to do the right thing, right? It could be in products, like, for example, in the food processor, that we must lock the cup and the lid in place, or in the car, that we must tighten the fuel cap for 3 to 5 clicks, right? So we know that it's not over tightened, but on the other hand, it's enough. In the lawnmower, we must hold the bar so it doesn't release and hurt other people, right? So it can be done in products and in processes. In processes, it could be automation or a checklist of items or drop-down menu. Of course, in communication, it's going to be establishing ground rules so we know what to expect and how to expect, an escalation procedure so when something goes wrong, people are not going nuts, right? And again, I mean, we see reviews, ground rules, automation, and so on, right? These are the ways, and we got to think this is prevention. How do I design it in such a way that will essentially force the people who use this process to do the right thing, right? So they don't have to think about it all the time. It just, if I go to a website and I try to enter a credit card, and it doesn't match the address, so I put a letter by mistake in the numeric field, it's not going to let me do that, and it's not going to approve the transaction, right? This is a basic way of doing it. Another thing related to quality is health indicators or health measures. What I try to do in a project, I try to say, okay, look, we have a whole bunch of things that can indicate to us where the project is going before we even see actual product-driven results. What do I mean indicate? For example, small deliverables. I want to check if the small deliverables are produced at the pace and the quality that I need, because if they're not, it indicates that the future may not yield the large deliverables done properly. Scope and requirements. I want to check how many changes we have per requirement, right? The more changes, the less stability. As far as I'm concerned, the change is almost a failure of the scoping process. Issues and risks. How many issues are being accumulated in the project and how it's trending? Same with risks. I mean, too many issues, too many risks. Usually it indicates that things will start to fall off later on. A human factor, this is harder to measure, but conflicts and team dynamics, I want to see how the team is actually getting along. When people don't get along, it's almost like in a sports team. When people do not pass to each other, what does it mean, right? I mean, how can we actually achieve success if my players are actually not passing the ball to each other? I want to check the quality of the estimating, and then, of course, the customer, how happy the customer at different points. These indicators are not good on their own. The only way to achieve them is to measure them over time, and then benchmark one project against another. So after, for example, 2-3 projects, I'm starting to have a trend about the number of changes that have been submitted per requirement. It can tell me the stability of the requirement, and then based on that, I can tell you, okay, where this project is heading. It's almost like with the economy that they have all sorts of leading indicators. These are numbers and measures that when they appear, we may be able to expect certain trends with inflation, employment, or whatever moving forward. Understanding stakeholder needs is the next thing. We don't do that enough. We don't really go deep enough. This is usually due to lack of time and, of course, the fact that stakeholders are introduced to us throughout the project and we don't really take, pay enough attention to it. Right? We really got to conduct a robust stakeholder analysis. I need to know who these people are, what they want from me, what do they expect from the project, when they're involved, how they're involved, how loud they are in their involvement. Are they supporters or opposition? Are they involved in other initiatives? Do they have any conflicts involved, right? So really, this is the mechanism for transparency. Of course, I have to pick my battles, so I cannot actually satisfy all stakeholders, but I need to know the needs and I need to know what might happen with certain stakeholders under certain circumstances. We never have time for it, so the more research, investigation we do, the more it becomes our second nature, the easier it's going to be for us to actually identify stakeholders that we got to pay more attention to, or that we got to build the relationship with them. And again, people who oppose what they do and they tell everyone about it are not necessarily my enemies. These are the people that actually have to reach out to them and try to work well with them. Then it gets me to communication. I call it communication 100 because there's a 100% responsibility on each side of any communication model, right? So if I try to tell you something in a project, there is a 100% responsibility on me. The onus is on me as the speaker, the generator of the message, to make sure that the message is clear, is delivered, and is received and understood. Now, I cannot actually get into your head, so it's also a 100% responsibility on your side that you got it, and that you communicate it back to me, and that if you have questions, you ask, and if you want to make sure that you understood it properly, you paraphrase, right? This is so important, no matter what culture, no matter what country. I mean, breakdown in communications are so common, cross-cultural or even within cultures, right? We all think we are excellent communicators, and we don't pay enough attention to it. PMI says that we spend close to 90% of our time. This is 90% of our time communicating, and unfortunately, it doesn't really happen effectively, right? I mean, we don't really think about the needs of the people around us. We don't establish what our needs are or what the expectations are. right? So it says MBWA, managed by walking around, but for real, I mean, my job as a project manager to focus on those things that matter, remember, on that right side of the brain that I pointed before. And I got to do it by walking around. Sitting down and staring at a Gantt chart or a schedule will not manage the project for me effectively. Again, formal communications and informal communications. Formal communications usually is covered properly, and project managers will have a table that establishes who generates what message to whom, at what format, at what time, at what style, and what information. This is all basic. But what we need also is a set of guidelines or ground rules for informal communications. Again, my company specializes in these things. What we do is that we go to organizations and tell them, look, I mean, if you want to achieve more effective communications, this is what we have to do. Actually, an example for these things is on our website, pmconnectors.com, when you go to downloads and then to the WAV, which is the web added value for the book. This is free. It talks about 3 criteria here. General communications, code of conduct for email, and then meeting expectations, right? I mean, generally, for example, here now, I mean, we are on 2 sides of the world. I mean, you guys on the afternoon, it's almost 3:30 your time, 4:30, sorry. My time is 8:30 in the morning, so here, obviously, if we are trying to conduct business together right now on a project, one of us has to probably, either you have to stay late or have to wake up early, right? So we have some time of overlap. These are the things that I want to establish in the communication. When you tell me that you need something by 5 p.m., I need to know which 5 p.m. it is. Is it your time or my time? And these are basic things that cause so many misunderstandings in projects. Even here in North America, right? I mean, we have Pacific time and we have Atlantic or Eastern time, and they are 3-4 hours apart. And once again, a lot of confusion. About email, we're all good with email, but unfortunately, we don't really utilize email properly. We use too many emails. We don't represent what we say properly by misusing the subject line. We CC too many people. We reply to all when we don't have to. Sorry, the emails are written in a very random format where people write stories and essays instead of actually get to the point. And of course, people don't respond to emails, especially when we're on the two other sides of the world. You cannot just come to my desk and tap on my shoulder, right? We got to make sure that we have an established method of using email a little bit more efficiently with a little bit less noise in the background. And of course, meeting expectations, whether it's direct meetings or virtual meetings. I mean, meetings are a big problem. I'm a big fan of conducting meetings that are short enough with the right number of people, not more than that. And of course, if I can reduce the number of meetings, I'm doing my job. I did actually a little bit of a project with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees where we reduced the number of meetings, right? And reduced the duration of the meetings and the number of people involved, and all of a sudden, information started flowing properly. Same thing with the email. So these are the 3 areas that we refer to when we say more effective communications, and make sure that the ground rules are in place. And these are perfect pokayokis, so what we do and don't do, and what we should expect. For example, with the email, I mean, let's establish that you'll respond to my email within 24 hours, unless, of course, you're out of office and then I'll know about it. And if you don't respond after 24 hours, I will assume that you haven't received it, but this will reduce the need, for example, for me to send you read receipts and all sorts of other annoying things. Conflict management also, this is inevitable, and we got to recognize now conflict is not necessarily the right word. I'm not talking about fighting with each other, but definitely when we say conflict, this is disagreement, this is conflict of interest. I'm not talking about ethical conflict of interest. I'm talking about that when we want the same thing or we want the opposite thing, right? We must be able to actually manage conflict and address the needs of those who are involved. As a project manager, I don't want to become part of conflicts. I want to be the facilitator of the conflicts, and part of it is establishing escalation criteria. So, okay, when we don't agree, when we have any issue, how do we escalate it? How do we go to the next level? How do we draw the attention of those that we need to get their attention without actually pressing the panic button too early? Overall, those disagreements, they foster innovation and creativity, right, if they're done properly. But if people are afraid of voicing their opinions, or people are afraid of dealing with each other, we're going to achieve artificial harmony, right? But speaking speaking of leading indicators, it's going to come and backfire on us as we move ahead. Process and improvement, I don't have to talk about it much. We all know the power of process. We all know the need to streamline process, and we all know the critical need of ensuring the process is improved on an ongoing basis, right? Again, I mean, I don't want to have ceremonial aspects of the process. I want to make sure that the process serves us rather than actually that we work for it. But if we fail to take the existing processes and continuously improve them, these processes are going to fall behind. They're going to become stale, yesterday's news, instead of actually addressing real needs. So productivity, utilization, and time management, again, I mean, all these things, we love talking about them, but nobody really does anything about it. Right? I want to check, first of all, how I manage my time, right? And it starts with meetings and emails, of course. I want to mentor others, because imagine if I save a few minutes a day on my time, and I save several minutes a day per team member every day. I noticed in some projects that people manage to save thanks to just a little bit of improvements in the way that they manage their time and their activities. Probably half hour to an hour a day. Imagine the tremendous savings organizational-wide, worldwide. When you talk about when each and every one of us manages to improve only by half hour to an hour a day, this is like almost a full working day per week, right? Actually, from a productivity perspective, it is a working day, 5 hours, right? So I want to make sure that let's measure something. Like Tuckman said, whatever is measured is managed, right? I mean, I want to check, I want to keep track of meetings, waste, emails, and this is how I actually help people improve their time. We start by managing our day, defining, okay, how I'm going to actually conduct my day, count the number of surprises, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to track them, right? And utilize the productive times of day. For most of us, productive times are mornings. So I prefer, if we don't have meetings in the morning, let's have meetings maybe at 11 a.m. leading to lunch, and then in the afternoon. So we actually have a chance to do something with ourselves instead of just showing up at 9 a.m. and straight into meetings. I mean, again, I'm not familiar with how each and every one of your organizations operates, but in most places I've seen, usually mornings are focal points for meetings, and then by the afternoon, when we get tired and ready to go home, this is when we try to squeeze in some work, and all of a sudden we're not very productive. So let's push the meetings to the afternoon. It's also going to force us to reduce the number of meetings a little bit. We said surprises. Let's track the emergencies and say, okay, how do we deal with emergencies, right? How effective we are. And by the way, how much time the emergencies consume from us. Again, I mean, I want to define what an emergency is, and I don't want to have false alarms, but at the same time, it's a reality, right? I cannot necessarily reduce the number of emergencies, but what I can do is control it and know, okay, how much time of my day is dedicated for emergencies on average versus non-emergency. And this slide just talks about non-value-add activities that we all engage in for so long, right? Arguments that are not necessarily necessary, and all sorts of problems with the process that after that we have to trace back. Too many stakeholders involved, especially in approvals that are not necessary. Communication breakdowns, that this is what I'm trying to do here. And reactive risk management, right? I mean, obviously when we are reactive, we planned, we failed, the problem occurred, and now we're just tracing it, and any other bottlenecks and inefficiencies. By the way, one of the things that I try to do here is establish what actually constitutes urgent or emergency, right? I mean, I want to, when two people, project managers, stakeholders, team members, it doesn't matter, but when two people engage with each other and one says, listen, I have an urgent thing, I want to define what actually constitutes urgent. And again, we have 3-4 criteria that we can pay attention to, right? I mean, definitely deadlines. So if we both need something and you need it sooner than I do, right, or you need something sooner than I need something else, your stuff is more urgent than mine. It's pretty straightforward, but let's define it. Also dependencies. I want to check what depends on what you need right now. Right? Is it deliverables? Is it resources? Is it generally, when we say the word dependency, we refer to either deliverables, resources, or risk. Sorry, and I want to say, how do we define it? How do we actually pay attention to it, right? And then, again, if it's a resource, right, so you're utilizing a resource that I need next week, so I depend on you. Let's define it, and then we're going to be able to see what's more important to do. Same with severity of the impact of what's going to happen. And then any other consideration, like, for example, certain senior stakeholders, when they need stuff, we cannot actually question that. We cannot actually argue with that. Resource management, we all know that resources are the main challenge that we have in a project, and one of the ways to overcome and to integrate things is to manage, we said collaboration. I wore the word drum here on the third bullet point. Drum resources coming from critical chain, for those of you who know, and if you don't know, it doesn't matter, right? It's about when we share resources across multiple projects, we got to have the ability to manage the time of that individual resource just like we manage the time of the project. And then we build a schedule for that individual resource, and we make sure that that individual is always utilized. That is, that they don't wait anywhere, and on the other hand, that then they relate to where they have to be. So you can view that like any type of VIP, and when we have a VIP, traffic will be stopped for them, and somebody will get the elevator for them, and somebody will get the car for them. So at any given point in the project, we have to treat those resources that are important for us that we share as a form of VIP. Risk, we know, resource and the sources, right? Source of risk, I mean, we gotta actually define where risk coming from. So surprises, of course, they want to reduce the number of surprises. And specific conditions, they gotta ask subject matter experts about the product or the technical aspects of what we do. Assumptions. Most of us don't like assumptions. Most of us treat assumptions like a necessary evil. Unfortunately, assumptions are not an evil. Actually, they're very necessary to manage our project. All I need to do is to create a spreadsheet and track those assumptions, right? So say, what's the condition, what I need to know about it, who I need to know it from, and when I need to know it. And the expiry date of the assumption is when the assumption turns from an assumption that is a condition into a risk. Trust me, and trust many people that I have taught throughout the years, I love assumptions, not because I love assumptions, but because I utilize them for the better interest of the project, right? And then if the assumption behaves the way I want, all good. If the assumption is not behaving the way I want, I treat it as a risk. Of course, I go to the risk breakdown structure, nothing new from the PMI, but I need to go and check where risks are coming from. Add to that unrealistic expectations, distraction, availability of resources and changes, right? And now I know where risks are coming from. I just have to keep in mind that when I manage risk, I take into consideration both project risk and business risk. Business risks are essentially, what is this project doing to the organization? So in one of my projects, a colleague of mine came to me and said in the middle of the project, listen, we cannot deliver a couple of features because we don't have time and money to do it, so we have to remove them from the scope. I said, but the client needs the features. So my team member told me, yes, but the client also needs stuff on budget, on time. I said, okay, so what's going to happen with these features? And I was told, well, the client is going to get them as a part of a warranty. So they're going to have to come in and we're going to fix the product for them. I said, really? Like, are you happy as a client when all of a sudden you're being called to the dealership for a recall for your car? Listen, I mean, the dealership, not the dealership, well, the car manufacturer screwed up, right? And now I have to come in on my own time. The fact that I don't pay for labor makes me very happy, but the rest is on me, the hassle, right? So I need to make sure that what I do in the project is not having a negative impact on the organization. This is called business risk or operational risk. It's very simple, but if I do something fast and cheap, and as a result, the organization is going to have additional costs or time or whatever after the fact, I'm not doing a good job. And unfortunately, many of us project managers put out fires like that. We say, okay, you know what, we're not going to do it now, so the project looks good, and after that, the organization has to spend that money from somewhere else. Now, what do you mean spend that money? This is about money that will not go to shareholders, not go to the bottom line, and of course, money that will be missed from other future projects. So if this is our strategy, just to kick the can down the road, we're doing a very good job because we are not actually fixing problems, we are just deferring them. And sometimes it's a better option to deliver stuff late, for example, rather than actually cause this type of problems for the organization. Moving ahead, issues and change control. We talked about these too. Again, I want to manage issues. Issues are not necessarily bad things, but they're areas of concern that if they don't get addressed, they may become bad things. And then, of course, project change control. I mean, probably the biggest enemy of the peace of mind of the project manager, and of course, the biggest enemy of project success, right? I mean, when we don't handle change properly, and handling change properly, it means go back to the sources, go back to where change is being introduced, go back to the stakeholders and work with them so they are less tempted to submit change requests. I'm not saying to suppress needed change that indicates innovation or improvement in the product. I'm saying check if we really need it from an objective perspective, from the right thing, from a charter perspective. Is this really the thing that we were mandated to do? We talked about assumptions. We said I don't want to hate assumptions. Probably if you take away one thing out of this 45-minute presentation, you've got to take this away. Manage your assumptions. If you don't like spreadsheets, do it with sticky notes in your pocket. Every time write the assumption, and then again, when the date comes, check if the assumption is standing or not. Or when you talk to a stakeholder associated with it, check if they actually have the answers for you or not. And management of assumption is key for proactive risk management. Estimating and scheduling factors. You cannot actually integrate and put things together without taking a look at the quality of the estimates. I want to take a look at the team, human nature. Some resources tend to inflate, some resources tend to be overly ambitious. I want to make sure that we are all on the same page, right? When I say language, I mean let's talk in a consistent way. Are we talking effort? Are we talking duration? What's the business day? What's productivity rate and things like that? And then think big, right? Think really. Dependencies, what's going on in the organization? I don't work in perfect conditions. There are realities out there. There are resources that are going to be taken away. There are dependencies. There are deliverables that are not going to come in there as suppliers. So take the hope out of the strategy, right? I mean, don't say, I hope that supplier is going to be on time. Make sure that you have something that accounts for it on your schedule. Think about critical path consideration. Make sure that not more than probably 25 or 30% of your activities are on the critical path, because more of that will make the critical path too heavy to be able to load all of them. And then also off critical path activities. So even if you're not on the critical path and activities are starting to slip behind, it may indicate that your project is doing well, but it's not necessarily the case. So make sure that that you consider also delays that are off the critical path. Reporting, part of communication, right? Make sure that we actually have a system of reporting, that the stakeholders know what they're going to get as far as formats and colors and whatnot and thresholds, that there's clear escalation, and that the information is relevant for the stakeholders. It requires a little bit more upfront work on my side to establish those needs and to articulate them, and then after that it's going to be much easier and much more meaningful. At the end of the day, when I refer to both stakeholders and the team member, keep them thinking but maintain focus. I don't want free fall. I don't want people to come up with improvement ideas that don't help me right now, right? I want them to challenge the process while keeping and following it. I want them to push the envelope without losing track of what we're doing. I don't want, on the other hand, people to fly on autopilot because they're too comfortable over there, right? Get people to think, help prioritize. When I give you 10 things to do, whether you're an engineer or a developer, I want to give you the order of things to do, right? That's keeping you thinking about what you have to do, not about what's next, right? If I give you 10 things to do, I'll give you the sequence of the things that I need from you, because it's most likely that you will not know that sequence. With that, reduce false alarm. When we are better prepared, we panic less, we are more composed when situations strike, and we will raise less red flags for nothing, right? Identify underlying issues. Check the full reach of impact of things. And by the way, when we think about problems, think about also resolution. And then incorporate lessons learned, right? First of all, let's take out that term post-mortem, right? Because post-mortem sounds like somebody just died and this is not good, right? At the end of the project, we don't treat it like something bad happened. We treat it like, okay, whether it was good or we did not achieve what we needed, We now look back and we say, let's pick up the good things that happened here, because even if in a failure there are good things, unfortunately, sometimes we gotta go through failure, and then even if it's not a failure, but if it's a success, we can still learn from it. Right? Collect information throughout the project. Do lessons learned frequently. Really, in Agile, they do it at the end of every iteration. Do it at the end of every milestone. Right? We gotta have time to do it, because the lessons learned are not about big things that we will incorporate in the future. These are about small things that we can incorporate in real time. Right? Apply them immediately. Right? Some small changes, not many or few big changes, just some small changes. It will help create momentum, right? And at the end of the day, at the end of the project, or at the end of the phase, I want to ask myself, are we better off today, human-to-human relationship, product-wise, project-wise, process-wise, than we were before? Because if we are not, it means that we are not heading in the right direction, right? So integration for real, right? Those concepts are straightforward, but those concepts are usually being left behind because we get focused on the mechanics of the project. We get focused on scope, we get focused on schedules, we get focused on budget sometimes, right? And we forget to actually address those things that shape up, almost like the metadata of the project, the things that really shape up the direction that we are going. Right? The challenge is putting it all together, balance the objective, right? For that I need emotional resilience that is focused on what matters. Don't let noise interrupt. I'm talking about unnecessary noise. And of course, as a leader, I'm not always bearing good news, but I got to be able how to communicate and handle even when situations are not perfect, while of course maintaining relationships. One of the last things that I want to do is talk about the need to say no. And as a project manager, many times we have to say no, but I want to make sure that when I say no, it's in context, because I don't want just to say arbitrarily no. So no, what does it mean? It means that you got to say, why not? What would be better, right? For every time you say no. You say, I don't want to do this. Why not? Because I think it's a better way. Really? What is the better way? Because don't just tell me there must be a better way. Right? So effective integration. Get the buy-in. Have a plan and get the buy-in for that. Be willing to make trade-offs, because it's not a perfect world, and learn quickly from your mistakes. So this slide essentially captures all the things that we talked about. Manage what matters, cost of quality, scope, right? Corrective and preventive measures, lessons learned, and so on. And this pretty much wraps up my portion here. And what I'm going to want now is to ask you to ask questions. So first of all, what we did, we had an overview of what integration was. We focused a little bit on planning then stakeholders, took a quick glance at really managing time and urgency, risk assumptions, false alarms, and saying no. At this point, first of all, I would like to thank you for sitting with me here for almost 45 minutes. Again, this is my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's very easy to find me on LinkedIn because there's only one of me, Ori Shibi, if you spell it correctly. Take a look at what my company does, right, with IT alignment, relationship with the BA, cost of quality, and please do ask the questions. So Ali, I will ask you now if you can please moderate or facilitate the process if there are any questions, and I'll be happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ori Shibi, for the very, very interesting presentation. Folks, we are open for the question and answers. If you have any questions, you can put it in the question box. I'll be happy to read them over on your behalf, or you could raise your hand to ask the question directly to the speaker. So let me see if there are any hands raised. Apparently there's one, so let me go straight to the caller. Let's see. We have a hand raised from Mr. Alphon Lyndon Johnson. Alphon, could you please hear us and ask the question? You have raised your hand. Hi, Alphon Lyndon. Can you hear us? I believe we have an audio connection with him. So folks, any other questions? I have not received any questions so far in the question box. So kindly do raise your hand if you have a question, if you want to speak. So I can unmute your microphone and you can have a direct audio chat with the speaker. We shall wait for another minute or so, or it's no question so far.
Well, Ali, I always say when there are no questions, it's either that people just got what they needed or that nobody paid attention.
Oh, well, I know, I understand. I mean, we've been running some series of project management webinars. Okay, we have the hand raised now, so let's go to caller from Murali Krishnan. Murali, could you please introduce yourself and ask the question, please? Hi, Murali Krishnan. You raised your hand, sir. I've unmuted you. Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question? Murali, can you hear us? Unfortunately, Mr. Krishnan, we cannot hear you, so could you kindly type your question? So let me move to another caller who has raised her hand. We have Jameson Joseph. Mr. Jameson Joseph, you've raised your hand. I've unmuted you. Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Go ahead. Please introduce yourself and ask the question, sir.
Okay, my name is Jameson Tanga. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm with Saudi Aramco, PMT Group.
Thank you very much, Jameson. Please go ahead. Ask the question.
I wanted to know, in terms of lessons learned, when you do them, do they assist you for the project you are doing, or you compile them for another group of people who are going to use the lessons learned? Thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you. Actually, they're very helpful. What I do when I say throughout, I collect the lessons with the team at the end of every meeting every week. And what do? We just one statement per person. What happened this week? Good, bad, ugly, luck, surprise. And I just capture it. If there's something immediately that I can do, I do. Otherwise, we just collect it, and then when we review those lessons, we check if this information was meaningful or not. If it was meaningful, we are going to go ahead and apply it immediately. Otherwise, I guess that somebody say, okay, it was false alarm, it was something like that, and then we want to say, okay, how do we avoid that? But the idea is that I don't do it at the end of the project. So it's not about the next project people, because it's very unlikely that the next project people will know where to look for the information or how relevant it's going to be for them. At the end of the day, I do it often enough. So most of the lessons that I capture throughout the project, I learn from them instead of actually waiting with them until the next project. If I do it in real time, imagine the improvement opportunities. Let's say that I have a project with 10 phases over a year. All I need to do is lessons learned at the end of every phase, and you know what? I'm going to have such more clear process and a much stronger team by the end of this project, and most of these improvements will be realized throughout the results of this project. So it doesn't have to happen only at the end. That's why. Take out the word post-mortem. Lessons learned is a lesson for a period, a lesson for a phase, a lesson for a milestone, and I want to have multiple lesson learned sessions, mini sessions throughout the project. I hope.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Jepson. Thank you very much for your question. Now let me go to the question box. We have a question from Brother Muhammad Efnoi. The question is, how to measure success of integration in the project? And can we have integration KPIs?
That's an excellent question. Measure of success of integration is essentially the success of the project. The KPIs of integration, the closest that I got to is to have those, and I'm going to slide back with the slides, those health measures, because those health measures are good indicators of success. Oh, I think I went too much back, sorry. Here, those interim indicators are usually excellent measures. They're KPIs because they're giving us information before the product is out. They show us dynamic, they show us number of changes, they show us how the team is functioning, right? And of course, overall the cost of quality. So once I manage to actually keep track of the cost of quality, that is how much it cost me to achieve quality. So for example, if I have a document that has to go through an approval before it's being submitted, how much money I'm investing in designing the document, in completing it. And then of course, in approvals, rejections, redos, right? And the number, and I've done projects with organizations that they have forms that they are submitted and then they're approved by 8 layers of approval, and each layer may actually throw the entire form out, and then you have to restart. And I found it to be a waste, right? Because we have so much duplication of effort. So my goal is to measure how much I spend on quality, check where it's spent, because it's most likely not spent in the right places. You see too much appraisal, too much failure, and how I manage to reduce it. So if there are indicators, these are the 2 main indicators. They are tied closely to quality, but essentially it's an indication on whether we are putting stuff together properly or not.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question from... yes, we have another question, sir, from Brother Haytham Ibrahim. The question is, the main job of project manager is project integration. To what extent this is true?
Well, one of the things that I said at the beginning was that integration is the essence of project management. So if we don't integrate, it means that we are managing a bunch of siloed activities. It means that you do scope, you can do scope great, but if it's not done in context of time and budget and quality, it's useless. You can be on schedule, but if it doesn't deliver what you have to, it's useless, right? So essentially, our job is to put it all together. We have the subject matter experts, we have the resources, we have everything that we need, or most of the things that we need, and it's just how to put it well together. You can take a look at team sports, right? Probably the main job or the main onus of integration is on the coach, right? Sometimes you have teams that on paper, they're candidates to win the championship, but unfortunately, something doesn't work well together. So that is, our talent doesn't come to fruition. On the other hand, you may have organizations that, or teams that don't necessarily have superstars, but there is strong leadership. So yes, I would say the essence is integration, and unfortunately, we don't focus enough on integration. What we focus on is on the easy win tangible, such as scope and schedule and cost, failing to actually deliver the full value of everything, right? And it's about everything, and integration is about everything. So I would say, I would probably agree with you. It's the main job of the project manager is to achieve integration.
Okay, thank you. We have another short one from Brother Irfan Ahmed. The question is, what is the most difficult part in project integration?
Excellent question. I heard it before. I think it's the integration. Integration is a relative thing, and it's about what is it do I see that I have to put together. And I would say most project managers, essentially all project managers, they conduct integration. The question is, how much scope my integration has. So some people say, for me, integration is just making sure that I deliver the product on time. For me, integration is just making sure that I deliver it on budget-wise. It's not that people do it on purpose. I just want to make sure. But when we fail to pay attention to the huge importance of risk management, of assumption management, of quality management, of measuring the cost of quality, of change management, right? Remember that slide with right and left, what matters. When we fail to pay attention to what matters. This is when our, our integration and our success will fail, right? Communication. Don't forget, most of these things that I talk about, communication, charter, risk management, these are not product-related things. They don't have product deliverables. These are more less tangible items. And as such, our problem is that we don't pay enough attention to them. Nobody's going to come to me in the middle of the project and say, hey, I noticed that your communication plan is flawed, right? Unfortunately, people will come to me and tell me in the middle of the project, I noticed that your project is not delivering what it's supposed to, and most likely it's because my communication is flawed. Most likely it's because I didn't do the risk, right? So integration is what we see, and most of us don't see enough. That's why I say these are things that we know that they have to take place. These are things that we know that they're there. Risk, assumptions, understanding success criteria, articulating success criteria. At the same time, it almost goes without saying. Even, I mean, most people don't have clear communication plan in their project, right? So what happens is that it's kind of free for all. People send emails, some respond, some don't respond. There's an emergency, some people raise red flags, some people take upon their own volition not to do it right. So it's a very mix and match of things. We think that even though we deal with adults, obviously, that people know how to conduct themselves. People know how not to raise red flags for nothing. People know how to answer an email. Unfortunately, we come from different places. And I'm not talking about different parts of the world. I'm talking about even two people who grew up together at the same school, same street, still may think different, right? So this is why the establishment of ground rules, all these things in the background, these are the things that will shape up the project. And again, analogy to sports. When you look at sports, you take a look at the referee. The less you notice the referee, the better this person is at managing the game, right? The less whistles, the more control. The less penalties, the more control.
Okay, let's see. We have another caller who has raised his hand. Let's see if we can have an audio. Okay, this is Mr. Murali Krishnan. You have raised your hand, sir, again. Let's see if you can establish an audio connection with us. Can you hear us, sir? Please introduce yourself and ask the question. So Murali Krishnan, I'm afraid, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. So well, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Mr. Ori Shibi, thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. I really want to thank you on behalf of the Medina Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship and PMI AGC for giving us the time and presenting this webinar live to the attendees. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Well, Ali, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, the whole handling from start to end. I hope that people benefited from it. And again, feel free to reach out through LinkedIn or through my website. I mean, it is a small world, and we never know how we may be able to help each other in the future. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much once again, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. Those of you who have remained attentive for minimum 30 minutes, the total duration, you shall receive an email from the MILE within the next 24 hours with complete instructions on how to claim the PDUs from PMI AGC for this webinar. With that note, I would like to conclude, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. Thank you very much once again, everyone. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.